So I had the opportunity to attend a Napoleon and Josephine themed Valentine's Day party this February, so that meant Regency era costumes. I had a couple options in my costume wardrobe for things I could wear to the party, but I thought that this would be a great chance to try my hand at making the classic Regency garment, the white muslin dress. The white muslin dress is like the little black dress of the Regency era. It goes with everything. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, you can pair it with accessories, jackets, jewelry, hats, whatever. Now I have tried numerous times to make what ought to be a pretty simple dress. The first time I didn't have enough fabric, so my skirt was too narrow. And the second time, I also didn't have enough fabric because I had altered an existing pattern and I forgot that I needed to cut the back sides wider than normal. So I ended up with this. But hey, third time's the charm. So I used a pattern from a new to me company, Black Snail. And every time I read that word, I keep thinking it says black sails, you know, like that pirate TV show. Anyway, since this is a downloadable pattern, the first thing I had to do was print it out. And my printer has this very special feature called being absolutely terrible. I have this janky little printer that does not print all the way to the edge or anywhere near the edge. It has really wide default margins, so my printed patterns almost always have edges cut off. This makes it difficult to know exactly how to match up my pages. Luckily, this pattern uses these little X shapes as markers, which was great because I could measure the width of the X to see exactly how wide apart my pages should be. That allowed me to use my ruler to line up my pages. Coincidentally, the entire pattern fit perfectly on my cutting table. Another nice thing about this pattern is that it doesn't make you waste a dozen or more pages on skirt pieces, which are essentially big, long rectangles. Instead, the instructions tell you to extend the top of the pattern pieces by 30 or so inches. By now I had ordered my dress fabric from fabric.com, but it hadn't yet arrived, which, by the way, I'll link to all my supplies in the description. So I went ahead and cut out the lining pieces to try out the fit. The bodice consists of 2 center back panels, 2 side back panels, 2 side front panels, and a center front rectangle bit that's gathered to fit. The only change I made was to widen the front panel of the dress by a couple inches just to give the bust some extra oomph. Only the bodice is lined on this dress, and I'm just using plain old white cotton muslin. Another thing I love about this pattern is the detailed instructions with clearly drawn illustrations on how to assemble this dress entirely by hand in a historically correct manner, which I completely ignored because I was on a tight deadline and I needed to finish this dress quick. Okay, I say that, but I actually did a lot of hand sewing on this gown, but all of the interior seams are machine sewn. Now with the lining all prepped, I waited patiently for my fabric to come in the mail. Well, I got my fabric in. I bought this gauzy cotton stripe, kind of transparent fabric, and it's really nice. I think it'll work. Except it is only 45 inches wide, and I don't know if I read the website wrong or if I read the pattern directions wrong, but the pattern required fabric that was 54 inches wide, and I did not get that. I did get the correct length of fabric, but not the correct width. I ripped the fabric to get a nice straight line for measuring the skirt panels, and turns out I was lucky because while the back skirt panel took up the entire width of the fabric, the front skirt panel was significantly narrower, which meant I could cut the bodice pieces and the front skirt piece in one width. One extra thing I did was to interline my bodice fabric layers. This meant that I cut another set of bodice pieces out of muslin and basted them to their corresponding outer fabric pieces along the seam lines. Basically, I wanted an extra layer of solid fabric to hide any of the raw seams that would have been seen through that sheer striped cotton. As a bonus, the basting lines made it easy to match up the seams along the curved back pieces. Then I sewed together all the pieces except for the center front panel. I left that out to add the drawstring channel. To do that, I first had to fold under the top edge twice to make a narrow casing. On the interior, I made a buttonhole in the center of the casing by hand. I sewed a border for my buttonhole with a running stitch, cut the hole open, and sewed around the opening with buttonhole twist thread, which is much thicker than regular thread. Now, if I had had my drawstring material at this point, I would have continued with the bodice. So while I was waiting for that to come in the mail, I skipped over to the skirt. This is kind of a theme with this project. I jump around a lot. Hopefully you can follow along. The back skirt panel has a long open slash to get the dress on and off. I measured down from the waist to cut the opening, then pressed a tiny narrow hem, which I then sewed by hand. After that, I sewed the two skirt panels together, which I didn't film because it's just two long straight seams. And with that, I moved on over to the sleeves. The sleeves have a single pleat at the bottom, which I basted in place, and the sleeve caps are gathered to fit the armhole. Then the sleeve seams are sewn. I chose to flat fell my sleeve seams, so I first had to trim one side of the seam allowances. Then I folded over the wider seam allowance, wrapped it under, and stitched it down by hand. Flat felling would have been an accurate seam finish for the time. It's also a very strong seam finish and leaves no raw edges. Next came the cuffs. They are first pinned right sides together with the bottom edge of the sleeve. Then sewn by machine. Then I folded the other cuff edge to the wrong side of the sleeve and finished it by hand. The sleeves are now done, and look what just arrived in time to finish the bodice. I ordered some 1/8 inch wide twill tape to make the drawstrings that go in the front and back of the bodice. 250 yards of twill tape. Obviously, I'm not going to use all of this for one dress, but this entire roll was only $7, and it seemed silly not to buy it. 2 lengths of tape go into the center front bodice panel through that little buttonhole I sewed earlier. Then I sewed the casing by hand with a prick stitch, which is like a short back stitch. With the front panel complete, I could now insert it into the rest of the bodice. After that, I sewed the outer layer to the lining along the neckline and clipped the seam allowances along the curves. There are another set of drawstrings along the back neckline, but they only extend from the shoulder seam to the center back opening of the dress. The drawstring is sandwiched between the outer layer and the lining. I again sewed the back casings by hand with a prick stitch. I really prefer this method of having separate front and back drawstring closures. I've made Regency dresses before that had one long drawstring going around the entire neckline, and they've never worked well for me. The back opening always gaped, and the dress always seemed to slide around the drawstring, and the gathers always looked wonky. This way, nothing gapes open, everything stays in place, and the shoulder area lays nice and smooth. And now we go back to the sleeves, which get pinned and sewn to the bodice right sides together by machine. Then comes the waistband. There are 2 layers which are first pinned to the bodice. Those are sewn by machine, and then I tacked down the ends of the waistband drawstrings at the side seams. I gathered the skirt with machine basting stitches. And this was when I remembered I needed to finish the armhole seams, so I trimmed the seam allowances and whip stitched the raw edges by hand. Again, a period appropriate seam finish. The skirt is then pinned to the outer layer of the waistband and sewn on by machine. The raw edges of the waistband lining are pressed under and sewn by hand. And now the little white Regency dress of my dreams is done. I'm wearing this over a shift, stays, and a bodice petticoat. I paired this with a sleeveless spencer, also from the same pattern. You'll notice that the taffeta is left over from my Alice Roosevelt gown. My cameo is vintage, and the shawl is made from 2 shawls sewn together to make it extra long. This is one of, if not the best fitting, best constructed costumes that I've made. Yes, it's a fairly simple design, but it doesn't have any fit issues. There's nothing that I have to go back and fix later, and that's like the holy grail of costuming. I am incredibly satisfied with this pattern, and I definitely want to try out more black snail designs in the future. But before I wrap up, I wanted to talk about something that I learned from making this dress. So the thing about Regency era fashions with the really high empire waistline is that they have a tendency to look like maternity wear on me. Especially the earlier dresses with the gathered front skirts. That's like a lot of volume at the waist area there. And I think if you don't have a large bust to balance out all of that volume, then you really run the risk of looking pregnant. So I avoided making that gathered front style of dress for that reason. But I decided to give this pattern a chance, and I'm really glad that I did because I love the dress. And I don't think that it looks like a maternity dress. I think I just look like a fashionable Regency lady from 1805. So maybe I was wrong. And that got me thinking, I've often heard other costumers talk about how they will avoid certain dress styles or certain fashion eras because they think that they're unflattering, or worse, that they don't have the natural body type for the correct historical silhouette. The 1920s comes to mind. And I certainly felt that way about this style of Regency dress until I tried it. And if you think about it, there has been so much variety in fashion in the last 300 years. And all body types have existed throughout time. So even if a woman didn't have the natural body type for the current fashion style, well, that's why they made shaping underwear. Seriously, nobody's boobs sit this high on their own. That's what stays are for. So if there's a lesson that I've learned here, it's that I should go outside my comfort zone and try new styles, even if I don't think that they're pretty or that I'll look good in them or that they'll be flattering. That's okay. And not every historical style meshes with modern beauty standards, and that's okay too. Sometimes making costumes isn't about looking pretty. Sometimes it's about making your sleeves bigger than your head. So I'm going to try to branch out more and embrace the full history of fashion and see what I like and what I don't like. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and maybe leave a comment with what unflattering fashion era you would like to explore. Thanks for watching. See you next week.